A humble farmer defended an elderly neighbor from scammers, but hours later, FBI vehicles surrounded his property with a shocking revelation. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning fog clung to the rolling fields of Jack Miller's farm like a protective blanket, obscuring the boundaries between his modest property and the surrounding countryside. At 63, Jack moved with the deliberate patience of a man who had spent decades working the land, his weathered hands steady as he repaired the aging fence line that separated his property from Martha Wilson's place next door. The rhythmic pounding of his hammer paused when he heard the unfamiliar engine approaching. Through the dissipating mist, a sleek black sedan appeared, crawling slowly along the gravel road that led to Martha's farmhouse. Jack straightened, his eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his faded baseball cap. Martha wasn't expecting visitors, especially not in a car that cost more than most folks around here made in 3 years. "Something ain't right," he muttered to himself, slipping his hammer through his belt loop. At 78, Martha had lived alone since her husband Thomas passed 5 years ago. She was sharp as a tack, but Jack had promised Thomas he'd keep an eye on her. Jack wiped his palms on his worn jeans and moved closer to the property line, maintaining a casual posture while watching the car park in Martha's driveway. 2 men emerged, both wearing suits that seemed too crisp, too perfect for the dusty back roads of Millfield County. One carried a leather portfolio under his arm. They moved with a confidence that immediately set Jack's instincts on edge. Those instincts, the ones that had saved his life more times than he cared to remember during his 20 years with the Army's Special Forces, had never quite faded, despite the 15 years he'd spent trying to bury them beneath the simple rhythms of rural life. The men knocked at Martha's door, and Jack watched as she greeted them with visible surprise. Her body language shifted from confused to interested as they spoke. Jack couldn't hear the conversation, but something in their gestures, too smooth, too practiced, made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He abandoned his fence repair and walked across the field toward Martha's house, careful to appear unhurried. As he approached, he could hear fragments of their pitch. Government program for seniors. Substantial benefits. Just need to verify your information. Martha was nodding, her thin hand clutching the doorframe. "Well, that does sound helpful. Please come in." Jack quickened his pace slightly. Before the men could step inside, he called out, "Morning, Martha. Those fence posts you were asking about are ready whenever you want them." The men turned, startled by his appearance. Martha's face brightened. "Oh, Jack. I didn't know you were working over here today." Jack ambled up to the porch, deliberately adjusting his posture to appear older, more stooped than he actually was. His eyes, however, missed nothing. The way the taller man's hand twitched slightly toward his jacket, the calculating assessment in both their gazes. "These gentlemen are from the government," Martha explained, the enthusiasm in her voice making Jack's stomach tighten. "They're helping seniors like me get our benefits straightened out. Is that right?" Jack smiled pleasantly, extending a soil-stained hand to the men. "Jack Miller. I farm next door." The taller man hesitated before accepting the handshake. "Richard Stevens. This is my colleague, David Ross. We're with the Senior Benefits Administration." Jack's calloused hand gripped Stevens just a fraction too firmly. "Never heard of it." "It's a new program," Ross interjected smoothly, opening his portfolio. "Part of the recent legislation to help seniors recover benefits they're entitled to." Jack maintained his friendly demeanor. "Mind if I join you folks? Martha's like family. I help her with all her paperwork since Thomas passed." A flicker of annoyance crossed Stevens' face before his professional smile reasserted itself. "Actually, this involves sensitive financial information. Privacy protocols." "Oh, Jack knows all my business," Martha interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "He helps me with my taxes every year. I don't mind if he stays." Stevens and Ross exchanged a quick glance that confirmed Jack's suspicions. He'd seen that look before, the silent communication of partners recalculating their approach when unexpected resistance appeared. "Well then," Stevens said, his smile tightening, "perhaps we could all sit down." Inside Martha's kitchen, with its faded floral wallpaper and the perpetual scent of cinnamon, the men laid out official-looking documents across her worn oak table. Jack took a seat beside Martha, his posture relaxed, but his mind cataloging every detail: the lack of proper government seals on their documentation, the 2 generic business cards, the absence of official ID badges. "As we were explaining, Mrs. Wilson," Ross continued, "our analysis shows you're likely eligible for up to $45,000 in unclaimed benefits." Martha's eyes widened. "Goodness, that much?" "Yes, ma'am," Stevens confirmed with practiced sincerity. "We just need to verify your information. Social Security number, bank account details for the direct deposit, and a small processing fee of $200 to expedite everything." Jack reached for the documents, his movements casual. "Mind if I take a look at these forms?" Stevens slid them toward him reluctantly. Jack studied them, immediately spotting the inconsistencies in the letterhead and the vague language carefully crafted to sound official without making actual legal claims. "Interesting," Jack said, keeping his tone conversational. "You know, my nephew works for Social Security over in the county office. Never mentioned any program like this." Stevens's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "This is administered directly from Washington. Most local offices aren't fully briefed yet." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Martha, would you mind getting me some of that iced tea you made yesterday? I'm parched from working on that fence." When Martha stood and moved to the refrigerator, Jack leaned forward slightly. "I think we all know what's happening here," he said, his voice low but carrying a steel edge that made both men stiffen. "And it's going to stop now." "I don't know what you're implying," Stevens began, but Jack cut him off with a subtle shake of his head. "3 options," Jack continued, his farmer's drawl giving way to something more precise. 1, you leave right now and never contact Martha again. 2, I call Sheriff Davis, who happens to be my brother-in-law, and you explain your government program to him. 3, Jack smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Well, let's hope we don't need to discuss option 3. The transformation in Jack's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. Something in his eyes, a coldness, a certainty, made the men hesitate. "You're making a mistake," Ross muttered, already gathering his documents. Martha returned with the tea, her expression confused as she noticed the sudden tension. "Is everything all right?" "Actually, Martha," Jack said, his friendly tone restored, "these gentlemen just realized they've made an error. You're not eligible for their program after all." Stevens stood, straightening his jacket. "That's right. We apologize for the confusion, Mrs. Wilson." Martha looked disappointed. "Oh dear, that's a shame." "We'll be going now," Ross said, his portfolio clutched tightly under his arm. Jack walked them to the door, maintaining his proximity. At the threshold, Stevens turned slightly. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in, old man," he whispered. Jack's expression remained placid, but his voice dropped to a register that neither Martha nor the retreating men could hear. "I've forgotten more about getting involved than you'll ever know. Now get off this property." He watched as they climbed into their sedan, the gravel crunching under their tires as they accelerated away too quickly. Only when they disappeared around the bend did Jack allow his shoulders to relax slightly. "Well, wasn't that strange?" Martha said, standing beside him on the porch. "They seemed so official." Jack patted her hand gently. "Lots of folks out there trying to take advantage these days, Martha. I don't think they were from any government I've ever heard of." Martha's expression fell. "You think they were trying to swindle me? Oh my goodness, I nearly gave them my information." "Don't worry about it," Jack reassured her. "No harm done. But listen, if anyone comes around like that again, you call me before you let them in, okay?" She nodded, looking embarrassed. I feel so foolish. Thomas always handled these things. You're not foolish, Jack insisted. These scammers are professionals. They know exactly what to say to sound convincing. As Jack walked back to his fence repair, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Those men hadn't seemed like typical scammers. They were too polished, too confident. And that parting comment from Stevens suggested something more complicated than a simple fraud attempt. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent behind the hills that cradled Millfield County, Jack sat on his porch nursing a glass of bourbon. The golden liquid caught the fading light as he swirled it absently, his mind turning over the morning's events. He'd called Sheriff Davis, who wasn't actually his brother-in-law, but was a good friend, to report the incident. Davis had promised to keep an eye out for the sedan and advised Jack to call if the men returned. Jack's gaze drifted to the old metal lockbox half hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his bedroom. 15 years he'd kept it closed. 15 years since he'd set aside that part of his life and become just another weather-beaten farmer, coaxing crops from the stubborn soil of western Pennsylvania. The sound of tires on gravel snapped him from his thoughts. Headlights swept across his front yard as a vehicle approached. Not the sedan from this morning, but a black SUV with tinted windows. Jack set his bourbon down, the familiar calm of anticipated conflict settling over him like an old coat. The SUV stopped, and a man stepped out. Tall, with close-cropped hair and the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. He approached the porch with measured steps. "Mr. Miller? Jack Miller?" the man called, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. "That's me," Jack confirmed, not rising from his chair. The man produced a badge. "Special Agent Thomas Reeves, FBI. I need to speak with you about an incident that occurred this morning." Jack studied the badge, his eyes taking in the details with practiced precision. It looked authentic. Not that counterfeits couldn't be convincing these days. "Mind if I make a call to verify you're who you say you are?" Jack asked, his tone casual but firm. Agent Reeves nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the request. "That's reasonable. You can call the Pittsburgh field office." He recited the number. Jack pulled out his cell phone, dialed, and after a brief conversation with the office, confirmed Reeves's identity. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and gestured to the empty rocking chair beside him. "What can I do for the FBI, Agent Reeves?" Reeves took the offered seat, his posture too straight for the relaxed setting. "I understand you had an encounter this morning with 2 men at your neighbor's property." Jack took a measured sip of his bourbon. "News travels fast." "Faster than you might think," Reeves replied. "Those men weren't ordinary scammers, Mr. Miller. They're part of an organization we've been tracking for some time." "What kind of organization?" Jack asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. "One that specializes in more than just financial fraud." Reeves's gaze was direct, assessing. Their usual pattern is to target isolated seniors, gain access to their finances and then their property. In several cases, the victims have disappeared afterward. Jack's fingers tightened imperceptibly around his glass. Disappeared. Relocated to care facilities under mysterious circumstances or simply gone. Properties sold quickly, records altered. Reeves leaned forward. "What I'm curious about, Mr. Miller, is how you managed to send them packing so efficiently. Most people don't recognize the threat until it's too late." Jack shrugged, his expression deliberately neutral. "Guess I've seen enough con artists to spot the signs." "During your farming career?" Reeves asked, the skepticism evident in his tone. "I wasn't always a farmer." "No," Reeves agreed. "You weren't. 20 years with Special Forces, if I recall correctly. Master Sergeant Jack Miller. Multiple deployments, specialized in counterintelligence and extraction operations." Jack's expression remained unchanged, but his mind was racing. His service record wasn't classified, but neither was it information that an FBI agent should have at his fingertips for a routine follow-up on a potential scam. "That was a long time ago," Jack said carefully. "Not so long that you've forgotten your training." Reeves glanced toward the darkening fields. "Those men recognized it too. That's what caught our attention." Jack set his glass down. "You were watching them." "We've been tracking this group for months. They're sophisticated, careful. They've never been spooked like this before." Reeves turned his gaze back to Jack. "They've also never reported back to their superiors about encountering someone with your particular skill set." The implication hung in the air between them. These weren't just scammers. They were something more organized, more dangerous, and they'd reported Jack's intervention to someone higher up the chain. "So now I've got a target on my back," Jack stated flatly. "Potentially, and Mrs. Wilson too by association." Reeves shifted in his chair. "But this also presents an opportunity. They'll be curious about you now." Jack felt a familiar coldness settling in his chest, the detachment that had always preceded the most dangerous missions of his career. "You want to use me as bait." "I prefer to think of it as utilizing an unexpected asset," Reeves corrected, though his expression acknowledged the accuracy of Jack's assessment. "This organization has left a trail of elderly victims across 3 states. We've never been able to get close to the leadership. But now they'll be looking at you, trying to determine if you're a threat. And you think they'll make a mistake in the process." "That's the hope." Reeves reached into his jacket and withdrew a small card with a number handwritten on it. "This is my direct line. If they make contact, or if you notice anything unusual, call immediately. In the meantime, I'd appreciate if you'd continue your normal routines. Don't give them any reason to suspect we've spoken." Jack took the card without looking at it. "And Martha, what about her safety?" "We'll have surveillance on both properties starting tonight. Discreet, but effective." Jack nodded, his mind already calculating angles, vulnerabilities, potential scenarios. It was a familiar process, one his brain slipped into with disturbing ease, despite the years of deliberate disuse. "There's something else you should know," Reeves added, his tone shifting slightly. "The local property records have been accessed multiple times in the past month. Searches focusing on Mrs. Wilson's farm and several other properties owned by seniors in the area. Looking for potential targets," Jack surmised. "Yes, but there's more. Mrs. Wilson's property, along with yours and the adjacent conservation land, sits on what developers have been eyeing for years. The valley has certain geographical advantages." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What kind of advantages?" "The kind that would interest people who move things they don't want found." Reeves stood, buttoning his jacket. "I've already said more than I should. Just keep your eyes open, Mr. Miller, and that phone close." As Reeves walked back to his SUV, Jack remained seated, turning his empty glass in his hands. The agent's revelations weren't entirely surprising. He'd suspected the scammers were part of something larger, but the implications were troubling. This wasn't just about Martha's bank account or his own intervention. Something bigger was happening in Millfield County. Once Reeves' taillights disappeared down the road, Jack rose and entered his house, moving directly to the bedroom. He knelt beside the loose floorboard and extracted the metal lockbox, its surface cool and unfamiliar after so many years of intentional neglect. The key had hung around his neck since the day he'd buried his past, a constant reminder of what he'd left behind and what he'd promised himself he would never return to. Yet here he was, inserting it into the lock with the grim certainty that circumstances had overridden his intentions. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside lay the remnants of a life he'd walked away from: a custom combat knife with a matte black blade, a set of lock picks wrapped in oiled cloth, a compact Sig Sauer P365 pistol that he'd maintained meticulously despite never intending to use it again, and several passports with his photograph, but different names. Beneath these items was a thin, leather-bound journal containing contacts, people who operated in shadows similar to those he'd once inhabited. people who owed him favors or whom he could trust in situations ordinary civilians would never encounter. Jack removed the pistol and checked it methodically, muscle memory guiding his hands through the process. The weight of it felt both foreign and familiar, like encountering an old friend who had changed in subtle but undeniable ways. He returned everything except the gun to the lockbox, secured it beneath the floorboard, and then moved to the kitchen where he retrieved a burner phone from a drawer filled with miscellaneous electrical items. He'd kept it charged out of the same ingrained caution that had prompted him to maintain his weapon. Habits that had once meant the difference between life and death were difficult to abandon completely. Jack dialed one of the numbers from memory, waiting as it rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Logan Supplies." "I need to speak with Ray about that specialty fence material," Jack said, the code phrases feeling awkward on his tongue after so many years. A pause, then. "Jack? Jesus Christ, is that really you?" "Hello, Mike," Jack replied, a hint of his old self bleeding into his voice. "I need some information." 15 years of silence and now you need information? Mike sounded incredulous but not angry. "Must be serious." "It might be nothing," Jack admitted, "but my instincts say otherwise. I need to know about any unusual land acquisitions or development interests in Millfield County, Pennsylvania, particularly involving elderly property owners." Mike let out a low whistle. "Back to work so soon after retirement?" "Not by choice," Jack said grimly. "Someone's targeting my neighbor. FBI's involved, but playing close to the chest. I need to know what I'm dealing with." "FBI, huh?" Mike's tone turned thoughtful. "Give me 24 hours, I'll see what I can dig up. Still at the same place?" "Haven't moved." "All right. Watch your 6, Jack. If you're on someone's radar after all this time, there's likely more to it than real estate scams." After ending the call, Jack moved to the window, scanning the darkening landscape with renewed vigilance. His peaceful existence as a simple farmer felt suddenly like a thin veneer covering the reality that had always lurked beneath. That some parts of a person couldn't be buried, no matter how deep the hole or how firmly packed the dirt. Out in the darkness, unseen but sensed, he knew FBI surveillance was being established. What they didn't know, what even Agent Reeves with his background check couldn't fully appreciate, was that Jack Miller hadn't merely been a soldier following orders during his time with Special Forces. He'd been a ghost, operating in regions and situations that never made it onto official reports. His particular talents had made him valuable to agencies beyond the military, agencies that preferred deniability over documentation. Jack pulled the curtains closed and checked the locks on his doors, a routine he performed every night but now invested with new significance. As he moved through the familiar rooms of the farmhouse that had been his sanctuary, he felt the weight of his past settling onto his shoulders once more. Whatever was happening in Millfield County, whatever threat these people posed to Martha and the other seniors in the area, Jack knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had made a critical error in drawing his attention. They would soon discover that the unassuming farmer they'd encountered was merely the retirement project of a man who had once been among the most effective operators in the shadowy world they were attempting to navigate. Sleep would be elusive tonight, Jack knew. Instead, he settled into his worn leather armchair, the Sig Sauer within easy reach, and began the mental process of transitioning from Jack Miller, humble farmer, back into the man he'd once been, the man some had called the Ghost. Dawn broke over Millfield County with a gentle persistence that belied the tension Jack felt as he moved through his morning routine. He'd slept little, his mind cycling through contingencies and worst-case scenarios with the methodical precision that had once been his professional hallmark. After a sparse breakfast, Jack walked the perimeter of his property, scanning for signs of surveillance. The FBI team was good. He spotted no obvious indications of their presence. But he sensed they were there, watching from the tree line to the east, probably from a vehicle parked on the service road that bordered the conservation land. More concerning was the unfamiliar sedan he glimpsed through his binoculars, parked at the far end of the county road, too distant to be FBI, too stationary to be a casual traveler. Someone else was watching. The game had already begun. Jack grabbed a basket of fresh eggs and a jar of honey, legitimate gifts from his small apiary and henhouse, and headed across the field to Martha's. The morning air was cool against his face, carrying the scent of dew-dampened grass and the promise of another hot summer day. Martha answered her door in a faded house dress, her silver hair neatly pinned back. "Jack, what a lovely surprise. Come in, I just made coffee." Inside, the house was exactly as it had been yesterday, but Jack found himself mapping entry points, calculating angles of fire, identifying defensible positions, automatic assessments he hadn't consciously made in 15 years. "Brought you some eggs and honey," he said, placing the basket on her kitchen counter. "How'd you sleep?" "Oh, fine, Martha replied, though the slight shadows beneath her eyes suggested otherwise. "Still thinking about those men yesterday. Can't believe I nearly fell for their scheme." Jack accepted the coffee she offered. "Don't beat yourself up. They were professionals." He hesitated, then added, "Martha, I've been thinking. Would you mind if I installed some security updates around your place? New locks? Maybe a simple camera system?" Martha looked surprised. "That seems like an awful lot of trouble for nothing. You really think those men would come back?" "Probably not," Jack lied smoothly. "But there's been talk of break-ins over in Harrisville. Better safe than sorry." Martha considered this. "Well, if you think it's necessary. Thomas always said you had good judgment about these things." Jack spent the next hour subtly reinforcing Martha's security, changing locks, adding simple sensors to windows, installing a doorbell camera that would feed to his phone as well as hers. All civilian-grade equipment that wouldn't raise eyebrows, but better than nothing. As he worked, he maintained casual conversation, carefully probing for any other unusual visitors or calls Martha might have received recently. She mentioned nothing suspicious, but did recall a surveyor who'd been taking measurements along her eastern property line about a month ago. "Said something about county reassessments," Martha explained, "but Thomas always handled that stuff. I wasn't sure if I needed to sign anything." "Did you?" Jack asked, keeping his tone conversational as he secured the last window lock. "No, he just took his measurements and left. Seemed in an awful hurry." Jack filed this information away. If Mike's intelligence panned out, this surveyor might be connected to whatever interest was being shown in the local properties. After finishing at Martha's, with promises to check in later, Jack returned to his own farm. The burner phone buzzed in his pocket as he crossed the field between their properties. "I'm listening," he answered. "It's worse than you thought," Mike said without preamble. "You've got Redwood Development Group operating in your county. They're a shell corporation for Kieran Blackwood's organization." Jack felt his blood cool at the name. Kieran Blackwood had been a mid-level arms dealer when Jack was still active. Evidently, he'd moved up in the world. "What's his interest in farmland?" Jack asked, scanning the horizon automatically as he walked. "Not the land, what's under it? According to geological surveys filed with the state last year, there's significant limestone karst formations throughout that valley. Cave systems, Jack. Perfect natural infrastructure for moving and storing things you don't want found." Jack cursed under his breath. That explained the FBI's interest as well. "How far along are they?" "They've acquired 3 properties already through various fronts. All former owners relocated to assisted living facilities out of state. Paperwork looks clean, but..." Mike trailed off meaningfully. "But Blackwood doesn't leave loose ends," Jack finished. "Exactly. There's something else. Your name flagged in their system yesterday. They're running deep background on you now." Jack wasn't surprised. "How'd you get this information, Mike?" A dry chuckle came through the phone. "Let's just say Blackwood's digital security isn't as robust as he thinks. I've got a friend inside their system. Limited access, but enough to see they're very interested in you and your neighbor." Anything on FBI involvement? Nothing concrete, but chatter suggests they've had an undercover operation for months. Might even have someone inside Blackwood's organization. Jack processed this. Thanks, Mike. Keep me posted on any developments. Will do. And Jack? These people aren't the amateurs you left behind when you retired. Blackwood's operation has tentacles in law enforcement, politics, even some federal agencies. Watch who you trust. The call ended, leaving Jack with a clearer picture of the situation and a growing certainty that Martha's farm, along with his own, was in imminent danger. Back at his house, Jack retrieved his laptop and began his own research on Redwood Development Group. Their website was professionally crafted, featuring glossy images of community developments and business parks. Their stated focus was revitalizing rural communities through strategic investment. A benign cover for what Jack now knew was a sophisticated criminal operation. As midday approached, Jack noticed a Millfield County utility truck slow as it passed his driveway. The driver appeared to be checking something on a clipboard, but Jack caught the quick glance toward his house, assessing, calculating. Not utility workers. Reconnaissance. Jack let them see him working in his garden, maintaining the appearance of an ordinary farmer going about his day. Inside, however, he was cataloging details. 2 men in the truck, both with the too rigid posture of men accustomed to more action than reading meters. One had a distinctive haircut that screamed military background. The burner phone buzzed again an hour later. Jack, my source just flagged something urgent, Mike said, his voice tense. Blackwood's people are accelerating their timeline. There's a meeting scheduled tonight at the Crossroads Motel outside Millfield, room 14. My guess is they're planning their next move. Any details on who'll be there? Not specifically, but expense authorizations were approved for some of Blackwood's top lieutenants. This isn't a routine check-in. After ending the call, Jack considered his options. He could alert Agent Reeves, but something held him back. Mike's warning about potential infiltration in law enforcement. Perhaps, or simply, the ingrained caution from years of operating in environments where trust was a liability. Instead, Jack drove into town, making a show of running ordinary errands, feed store, hardware shop, groceries. All the while, he was assembling what he needed: prepaid phones, basic surveillance equipment, and a few innocuous items that could be repurposed for less innocent applications if necessary. At the local diner, Jack took a booth with a clear view of the entrance and ordered coffee. The place was busy with the lunch crowd, providing good cover as he jotted down what appeared to be a shopping list, but was actually an operational plan for monitoring the Crossroads Motel that night. Mind if I join you? A voice interrupted his thoughts. Jack looked up to see Sheriff Davis sliding into the booth across from him. Davis was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of a man who spent considerable time outdoors. They'd established a friendly relationship over the years, bonding over fishing and occasional poker games. "Free country," Jack replied, carefully folding his notes. Davis signaled for coffee, then leaned forward. "Heard you had some excitement yesterday. Martha Wilson mentioned some government fellas that you ran off." Jack shrugged. "Just scammers targeting seniors, nothing special." "Uh-huh." Davis studied him with shrewd eyes. "And I suppose the FBI agent who came asking about you at my office this morning was coincidence too." Jack's expression remained neutral, but internally he reassessed. Reeves hadn't mentioned contacting local law enforcement. What did this agent want? Background on you. How long you've been here. Whether you've had any troubles. Davis paused as the waitress delivered his coffee. Once she moved away, he continued. "Funny thing is, he seemed less interested in what I knew about you and more concerned with who else had been asking questions." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Someone else has been asking about me?" Davis nodded. "Couple of state troopers I didn't recognize came by last week. Wanted to know about property ownership in the valley, including your place and Martha's. Mentioned something about a drug trafficking investigation. Jack absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place. Did you help them? Gave them the public records information they could have gotten themselves. Something felt off. Davis sipped his coffee. Jack, I've known you 15 years. Never pried into what you did before you came here. Figure a man's entitled to his privacy. But if there's something I should know about what's happening, something that might affect folks in my county, I'd appreciate a heads up. Jack considered his response carefully. Davis was as straight as they came, but involving him could put the sheriff in danger. On the other hand, local knowledge and cooperation might prove invaluable. Let's just say, Jack finally replied, Martha's farm and mine might be of interest to people for reasons beyond agriculture, and these people don't ask nicely when they want something. Davis held his gaze for a long moment. I've got deputies I trust. Can arrange extra patrols. I'd appreciate that, Jack acknowledged. Especially around Martha's place. But Davis... He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Be careful who you bring into this. The situation is... complicated. The sheriff nodded slowly, understanding the warning. Always am. As they parted ways outside the diner, Jack felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The circle of those involved was widening. Reeves, Mike, now Davis. Variables he couldn't fully control in an equation that was growing more complex by the hour. The sedan he'd spotted earlier that morning drove slowly past the diner as Jack climbed into his truck. The driver didn't look his way, but didn't need to. The message was clear. They were watching, assessing, planning. So was Jack. And unlike them, he knew exactly what was coming. The Crossroads Motel lived up to its name, a tired, single-story building at the intersection of two county highways, its neon sign flickering half-heartedly against the darkening sky. Jack parked his truck behind the adjacent diner, now closed for the evening, giving him a clear view of the motel's parking lot, while remaining inconspicuous. Through his binoculars, he observed room 14, currently dark and seemingly unoccupied. The motel's occupancy was light. Only 4 other rooms showed signs of habitation, all well separated from his target. Ideal conditions for surveillance. Jack checked his watch. 7:42 p.m. The meeting wasn't scheduled until 9 Tasung, according to Mike's intelligence, giving him time to establish proper positioning and contingencies. He reached into the duffel bag on the passenger seat and extracted a small listening device, no larger than a button, and a compact receiver with earbuds. Moving casually, as if he were just another traveler stretching his legs, Jack walked the perimeter of the diner, establishing sight lines and identifying potential problems. No signs of FBI surveillance. Either Reeves didn't know about the meeting, or they were maintaining extreme distance. Either possibility concerned him. When he was confident no one was watching, Jack circled around to the back of the motel. Room 14's bathroom window was slightly ajar, a stroke of luck. With practiced ease, he planted the listening device on the window frame, then retreated to his position in the shadows behind the diner. At 8:37, the first vehicle arrived, a black Suburban with tinted windows. 2 men emerged, both wearing dark suits that failed to conceal the outlines of shoulder holsters. They conducted a perimeter check, including a sweep of the diner that had Jack pressing deeper into the shadows, pulse steady despite the danger of discovery. Satisfied, one man spoke into his wrist mic, and a second vehicle pulled into the lot, a silver Mercedes with diplomatic plates. Jack adjusted his binoculars, focusing on the silver-haired man who stepped out. Even after 15 years, Kieran Blackwood was immediately recognizable, taller than Jack remembered, his face more lined, but still bearing the same cold confidence that had made him notorious in certain circles. Unexpected, Jack murmured to himself. Mike's intelligence had suggested lieutenants, not Blackwood himself. This meeting carried more significance than anticipated. Blackwood and his security detail entered room 14, illuminating the space. Jack activated the receiver, adjusting the volume carefully. Static crackled briefly, then cleared. "Secure?" Blackwood's voice, carrying the faint trace of his Irish heritage despite years in America. "Yes, sir. Room's clean, perimeter clear," a subordinate confirmed. "Good. The others should be arriving shortly. Roberts is bringing the county assessor." Jack's interest sharpened. A local official involved meant deeper corruption than he'd initially suspected. Within 15 minutes, 2 more vehicles arrived. A nondescript sedan carrying a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit, who Jack didn't recognize but assumed was the county assessor, and a Range Rover delivering an elegant woman and a younger man, who carried himself with military precision. Once all were assembled inside, Jack listened as Blackwood took control of the meeting. "Let's review where we stand," Blackwood began. "We've acquired the Peterson, Gunderson, and Matson properties. Wilson's farm is next. Then Miller's. Combined with the conservation land we're arranging to lease from the county, we'll have complete control of the Northeastern Valley system." "About Miller," the military-looking man interjected. "Something doesn't add up. Our background check shows 20 years Special Forces, but there are gaps, significant ones." "Explain," Blackwood demanded. "His record is too clean, too straightforward. No specialized training noted, yet his unit was involved in operations requiring advanced skills. And after retirement, nothing. No security consulting, no government contracts, just farming. Men with his training don't just walk away." Jack felt a chill. They were digging deeper than he'd anticipated. If they pushed hard enough, they might find the carefully obscured connections to operations that officially never happened, agencies that officially didn't exist. "Is he a threat?" Blackwood asked. "Potentially significant. The way he handled Stevens and Ross yesterday suggests his skills remain intact. They reported a complete shift in demeanor. Subtle but definitive. One moment a farmer, the next, something else." The elegant woman spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. "We should proceed with Wilson immediately and eliminate the Miller complication before moving further." "Agreed," Blackwood replied. "Roberts, does your man at the county have the paperwork ready for Wilson?" The rumpled man, presumably Roberts, cleared his throat. "Yes, sir. We can process everything tomorrow. The approach will be different this time. No fake government agents. We'll come as representatives of a senior care facility, offering a placement that's already been arranged by her son." "She doesn't have a son," the woman noted. "She doesn't know that," Roberts replied with a nervous laugh. "We've created documentation, photographs, even a video call we can play. Confused elderly often misremember family details." Jack's jaw tightened at the callousness of their plan. "And Miller?" Blackwood pressed. The military man answered, "We have options. The simplest would be an accident. Farming has many hazards. However, given his background, I recommend a more controlled approach. Home invasion gone wrong, perhaps. We have people who can make it convincing." "Do it," Blackwood ordered. "Tonight, if possible. I want his property secured before we move on Wilson. She trusts him. If he raises concerns about our offer, it complicates matters." The meeting continued with discussions of the cave systems beneath the properties, their dimensions, access points, and suitability for moving product. Jack listened intently, recording every detail as Blackwood outlined plans for using the natural formations to create a distribution hub for weapons, drugs, and human trafficking, all protected by the legitimate-seeming Redwood development operation above ground. As the meeting wound down, the county assessor, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke. "What about Sheriff Davis? He's been asking questions about the previous property transfers." "Davis is a complication," Blackwood acknowledged. "For now, we maintain distance. If he becomes problematic, we have options. Our contacts in the state police can create sufficient distractions." The meeting adjourned with assignments distributed and timelines established. Jack remained motionless as the participants departed, Blackwood leaving first with his security detail, followed by the others at careful intervals. Only when the last vehicle disappeared did Jack retrieve his listening device and return to his truck, mind racing. The immediate threat was clear. Blackwood's people would be coming for him tonight, followed by Martha tomorrow. The broader conspiracy was worse than he'd imagined. Local officials compromised, state police connections, and infrastructure for a major criminal enterprise being established right in Millfield County. Jack started his truck and took a circuitous route back home, alert for signs of surveillance or ambush. His instincts screamed that time was short. Blackwood's people would be professional, prepared, and merciless. They would expect a retired soldier, perhaps with some retained skills, but softened by 15 years of civilian life. They wouldn't expect what Jack actually was, or what he was capable of when necessary. As he drove, Jack placed a call to Martha, using one of the prepaid phones he'd purchased earlier. "Hello," she answered, her voice tinged with confusion at the unknown number. "Martha, it's Jack. Listen carefully. I need you to pack a small bag and come over to my place right now. Use the path through the back field, not the road." "Jack, what on earth?" "Those men from yesterday weren't acting alone," Jack cut in. "There are more of them, and they're coming back. I'll explain everything when you get here, but right now I need you to trust me." There was a momentary silence, then Martha's voice, suddenly firm. "Thomas always said if there was ever real trouble, you were the one person I could count on without question. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Be careful and be quiet," Jack instructed, then ended the call. His next call was to Sheriff Davis, but it went straight to voicemail. Jack left a brief message warning of potential danger, but deliberately kept details vague. He couldn't risk the information falling into the wrong hands if Davis's phone was being monitored. As Jack pulled into his driveway, he saw no immediate signs of watchers or attackers, but the night was still young. Inside the house, he moved with rapid efficiency, gathering essential supplies and activating defensive measures he'd installed years ago, but hoped never to use. Motion sensors at key approach points, subtle early warning systems that would give him precious seconds of advance notice. In the bedroom, he opened the lockbox once more, this time removing everything within it. The Sig Sauer went into a holster at the small of his back. The combat knife was secured at his ankle. The lockpicks and a few other specialized tools went into his pockets. Jack checked his watch. Martha would arrive soon, and not long after, he expected Blackwood's kill team. He needed to get Martha to safety and then deal with the immediate threat. After that, he could focus on the larger problem of Blackwood's operation and its tentacles throughout local government. From a hidden compartment beneath his kitchen sink, Jack retrieved one final item, a satellite phone that would connect him to people he'd hoped never to contact again. People who operated in shadows far deeper than even Blackwood knew existed. Making that call would mean crossing a line he'd drawn firmly 15 years ago, but with Martha's life at stake and a criminal enterprise threatening his community, Jack was prepared to step back into the darkness he'd left behind. The soft chime of a perimeter sensor alerted him. Someone was approaching from the eastern edge of his property. From the pattern of activation, it was a single individual moving carefully through the field that separated his land from Martha's. Jack moved to the back door, weapon ready but concealed. Through the window, he recognized Martha's slight figure, making her way toward the house, a small suitcase clutched in one hand. He opened the door just as she reached the porch. "Jack," she said breathlessly. "What in heaven's name is happening?" "Come inside quickly," Jack urged, ushering Martha through the door and locking it behind her. He guided her to the kitchen, away from windows, and took her suitcase. "Sit down. I'll explain, but we don't have much time." Martha complied, her normally cheerful expression replaced by worried determination. This is about those men yesterday, isn't it? Yes and no, Jack replied, checking the perimeter sensors on his phone. No new alerts yet. Those men were just the surface of something much bigger. There's a criminal organization targeting properties in this valley, including yours and mine. Criminal organization like the Mafia? Martha's eyes widened, but her voice remained steady. Something like that, Jack confirmed, respecting her enough not to sugarcoat the situation. They've already acquired 3 farms in the county. The owners were coerced or tricked into selling, then relocated to care facilities out of state. Some may not have survived the transition. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Those poor people. But why? What do they want with our farms? The cave system's underneath, Jack explained, moving to the window to scan the darkness outside. The limestone formations throughout this valley create natural tunnels and chambers. They plan to use them for smuggling operations, weapons, drugs, possibly even human trafficking. And you know this how exactly? Martha asked, her shrewd eyes studying him. Jack Miller, I've known you 15 years and Thomas knew you before that. He always said there was more to you than met the eye. Jack met her gaze. There are parts of my past I left behind when I came here, Martha. Things I did, people I worked for, special skills. You weren't just a soldier, were you? Jack shook his head slightly. Not just a soldier, no. And now those skills may be the only thing keeping us alive tonight. These people are coming for me first, then you tomorrow. They've identified me as a threat to their operation. Rather than the fear Jack expected, Martha's expression hardened with resolve. Thomas always said if real trouble ever came, you were the one person I could trust without question. So I'm trusting you now. What do we do? Jack felt a surge of respect for this elderly woman who, faced with mortal danger, showed more courage than many hardened operatives he'd known. First, we get you somewhere safe. I have a secure room in the basement. It's well hidden and stocked with supplies. You'll stay there while I deal with our visitors. Deal with them how? Martha asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. However necessary, Jack replied simply. He led her to the kitchen pantry, moved aside several storage containers, and revealed a concealed door built into the back wall. Behind it lay a narrow staircase leading to a reinforced room beneath the house. A panic room Jack had constructed during his first year on the farm. Another precaution from a man who understood that some threats couldn't be outrun, only prepared for. This is quite something, Martha remarked as Jack showed her the small but comfortable space equipped with a cot, supplies, communication equipment, and even a small bathroom. There's water, food, first aid supplies. This tablet connects to the house's security system. You'll be able to see what's happening outside. Jack pointed to a heavy metal door on the far wall. That leads to a tunnel. If I don't return, or if I signal through the tablet, exit through there. It comes out in the old storm cellar behind the barn. From there, head east through the conservation land to Highway 22. Flag down help. Martha nodded, absorbing the instructions with remarkable composure. And if these people are as dangerous as you say, what chance do you have against them alone? Jack's expression remained neutral. I won't be the man they're expecting. After settling Martha safely in the panic room, Jack returned upstairs and completed his preparations with methodical efficiency. He disabled the main lights, leaving the house in darkness save for a single lamp visible from outside, suggesting normalcy while allowing his eyes to adjust to the low light conditions that would soon become his advantage. He positioned weapons strategically throughout the house, not just the Sig Sauer he carried, but others drawn from caches he'd established years ago. A shotgun behind the living room sofa, a .45 caliber pistol taped beneath the kitchen table, a garrote wire concealed behind a curtain rod. Tools for every contingency. Next, Jack activated a series of subtle defensive measures throughout the property. Tripwires in key approaches, pressure plates under specific patches of ground near entry points, and modified hunting traps that wouldn't kill, but would certainly impede. At 11:17 p.m., the first perimeter sensor triggered, the northwestern boundary, near the access road. Jack watched through his tablet as thermal imaging revealed 3 figures advancing through the trees, moving with the disciplined spacing of professionals. "Right on schedule," Jack murmured. He typed a quick message to Martha on the tablet. "Visitors arriving. Maintain silence." Then positioned himself in the shadows of the dining room, which offered clear sight lines to both the front door and the side entrance most likely to be breached. The intruders were good. They maintained communications discipline, using hand signals rather than radio chatter as they established positions around the farmhouse. Through his thermal scope, Jack counted a total of 5 operatives, more than he'd expected, suggesting Blackwood considered him a serious threat, despite his years of retirement. The kill team spent nearly 20 minutes observing the house, likely looking for security systems or obvious traps. Jack remained motionless, controlling his breathing, becoming one with the shadows as he'd been trained to do decades ago. Patience had always been his greatest weapon. At 11:43, they made their move. 2 men approached the back door while 1 covered the front. The remaining 2 maintained wider perimeter positions. Standard procedure for a home invasion against a potentially dangerous target. The lock on the back door was defeated with professional efficiency. Jack watched through the camera feed as the first man entered, weapon equipped with a suppressor held at the ready. The second followed, covering his partner's blind spots as they moved through the kitchen with practiced coordination. Jack waited, timing his response with precision born from countless similar operations. When the lead intruder passed the exact spot Jack had predetermined, he pressed a button on his phone. The effect was immediate and disorienting. All exterior lights activated simultaneously, bathing the property in sudden, harsh illumination, while inside, the house plunged into complete darkness as the single lamp went out. Simultaneously, a deafening alarm blared from speakers positioned around the exterior of the house. The sensory assault had its intended effect. The intruders hesitated, momentarily blinded by the contrast and disoriented by the noise. In that critical moment of confusion, Jack moved. He took the first man with brutal efficiency. A precise strike to the throat collapsed his windpipe, followed by a blow to the temple that rendered him unconscious before he could even register the attack. The second intruder managed to turn, raising his weapon, but Jack was already inside his guard. A sharp, upward palm strike broke the man's nose, driving cartilage upward with potentially lethal force. As the intruder staggered backward, Jack relieved him of his weapon and delivered a final strike that sent him crumpling to the floor. 20 seconds. 2 threats neutralized. Outside, the remaining team members were reacting, but the alarm and lights had done more than just disorient them. They had announced to anyone within a mile that something was happening at the Miller farm. Stealth was compromised. The third man burst through the front door, night vision goggles giving him an advantage in the darkened interior. But Jack had anticipated this, having positioned a small device on the ceiling that now activated, a directed infrared light that overloaded the goggles' sensors, effectively blinding the intruder. The man tore off the useless equipment, but by then Jack was upon him. This opponent was more prepared, managing to block Jack's initial strike and counter with a kick that would have incapacitated a lesser fighter. Jack absorbed the blow against his thigh, used the attacker's momentum to close distance, and engaged in a brief, vicious exchange of strikes that ended with the intruder unconscious and zip-tied beside his companions. The 4th and 5th members of the kill team were now faced with a decision: retreat, or continue the assault against what was clearly a more formidable adversary than anticipated. Through the window, Jack saw them conferring, then separating to approach from different angles. These would be the most dangerous, the ones who had observed the failure of the initial assault and adjusted accordingly. Jack moved to the staircase, positioning himself with clear sight lines to both the front and back entrances, the shotgun now in his hands. One of the remaining intruders attempted entry through a side window, moving with greater caution than his predecessors. Jack allowed him to clear the windowsill and take 2 steps into the living room before chambering around loudly enough to be heard. "Your colleagues are still breathing," Jack called out, his voice carrying the cold authority of his former profession. "You can join them in custody, or make this substantially worse for yourself." The intruder froze, assessing his options. "You're surrounded, old man. There are more of us than you can handle." "I count 5, Jack replied calmly. 3 down you, and 1 more outside. Those aren't promising odds from where I'm standing." A moment of tense silence followed, broken by the distant wail of sirens. Someone had heard the alarm and called the sheriff, exactly as Jack had intended. "Last chance," Jack warned. "Weapon down, hands where I can see them." The intruder's response was to dive for cover while raising his weapon. Jack fired once, the shotgun blast deliberately aimed to wound rather than kill. The man screamed as buckshot tore through his shoulder, his gun clattering to the floor. The 5th and final team member, hearing his colleague's cry and the approaching sirens, apparently decided discretion was the better option. Through the security feed, Jack watched him retreating rapidly through the trees toward what was likely a vehicle stationed on the access road. Jack secured the wounded intruder, then systematically checked the others. All were alive but incapacitated, exactly as he'd planned. Killing them would have been easier in many ways, but dead men answered no questions, and Jack needed information. As the sirens grew closer, Jack quickly collected the intruder's weapons, communications equipment, and identification. He had perhaps 2 minutes before the sheriff arrived, just enough time to check on Martha and prepare for the next phase of a night that was far from over. Sheriff Davis's cruiser skidded to a stop in Jack's driveway, lights flashing but siren now silent. 2 deputy vehicles followed close behind. Jack stood on the porch, shotgun now carefully set aside. His posture deliberately relaxed as Davis approached with his hand hovering near his service weapon. "Jack, you all right?" Davis called, eyes scanning the property, taking in the activated floodlights and the now silenced alarm system. "I'm fine," Jack confirmed, gesturing toward the house. "But I've got 4 uninvited guests inside who aren't doing so well." Davis signaled his deputies to approach cautiously, then joined Jack on the porch. "What the hell happened here?" "Home invasion," Jack replied simply. 5 men armed and professional, 4 are secured inside. 1 escaped toward the conservation land. Davis stared at him, clearly struggling to reconcile the calm, collected man before him with the unassuming farmer he thought he'd known for 15 years. "And you handled this situation yourself?" Jack met his gaze steadily. "I did." The sheriff opened his mouth as if to ask more questions, then seemed to think better of it. "Show me." Inside, the deputies secured the scene with professional efficiency, though their expressions betrayed shock at finding 4 incapacitated men, clearly trained operatives, all subdued by a supposedly retired farmer. The intruder with the shotgun wound received immediate medical attention, while the others remained zip-tied and under guard. "These aren't ordinary burglars," Davis observed, examining their weapons and tactical gear. "Military background, high-end equipment. What the hell were they after?" "Me," Jack said flatly. "And once I was out of the way, Martha Wilson's property next door." Davis looked up sharply. "Martha? Where is she?" "Safe," Jack assured him. "I got her out before they arrived." Before Davis could press further, the radio on his belt crackled. "Sheriff, we've got a vehicle approaching fast. Black SUV, no plates." Jack and Davis moved to the window in time to see the SUV stop at the edge of the property. Agent Reeves emerged from the passenger side, along with 3 other agents in FBI tactical gear. "Your FBI friend is back," Davis noted dryly. "Not my friend," Jack corrected, watching as Reeves surveyed the scene with barely concealed frustration. "And his timing is suspicious." Davis shot him a questioning look. "Meaning?" "Meaning I told you the situation was complicated." Jack turned from the window. I need 5 minutes with one of the conscious intruders before Reeves takes over the scene. Davis hesitated only briefly. Make it quick. Second bedroom on the right. My deputy will give us space. In the bedroom, Jack found the leader of the kill team, the third man he'd subdued, now conscious and secured to a chair. The man's face was bruised, but his eyes were alert and calculating. He assessed Jack with grudging professional respect. "You're not what we expected, Miller," he said, his voice carrying the faint accent of Eastern Europe. Jack closed the door and stood before him. "Who sent you? Blackwood directly, or through intermediaries?" The man's expression flickered with surprise at Jack's knowledge, then settled into resigned amusement. "You know more than you should. No wonder you're a priority target." "I'm going to make this simple," Jack said, his voice dropping to the cold, efficient tone that had once made hardened terrorists cooperate. "The FBI is outside. In about 3 minutes, they'll take jurisdiction. You'll disappear into federal custody, where Blackwood can't reach you, but neither can anyone who might help you. Your team failed. Blackwood will assume you talked. Your life expectancy becomes very short." Fear flickered in the man's eyes, not of Jack, but of Blackwood. "What do you want?" "The timetable. When is the next move on Martha Wilson's property? Who's the inside man at the county office? And where is Blackwood operating from locally?" The man licked his lips. "Wilson property is scheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Roberts handles the paperwork. County Assessor's Office. Blackwood is at the Lakeside Executive Retreat, North Shore." "The woman from the meeting? Who is she?" "Natalia Voss, Blackwood's partner, former SVR. Russian intelligence." The picture was becoming clearer and more dangerous. Jack heard footsteps approaching in the hallway. "One last thing," Jack pressed. "The FBI agent, Reeves, is he compromised?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Not compromised. Complicated." The door opened before Jack could pursue this cryptic response. Agent Reeves stood in the doorway, his expression hard as he took in the scene. "Miller, care to explain why you're interrogating a suspect?" "Just making conversation while waiting for professionals to arrive," Jack replied smoothly, stepping away from the prisoner. Reeves wasn't amused. "I need to speak with you, now." Outside in the hallway, Reeves positioned himself close to Jack, keeping his voice low. "You were supposed to call me if they made contact. Instead, I find you've neutralized a professional hit team and compromised months of investigation." "They didn't make contact," Jack corrected. "They tried to kill me. And your months of investigation didn't seem to include warning me about a hit scheduled for tonight." Reeves's jaw tightened. "We didn't have that intelligence." "Then your operation has gaps," Jack said bluntly. "Blackwood is moving faster than you realize. Martha Wilson's property is targeted for tomorrow morning. They have someone inside the county assessor's office preparing the paperwork." "How do you know this?" Reeves demanded. "I have my sources," Jack replied, deliberately vague. "And right now they're proving more reliable than yours." Reeves studied him with narrowed eyes. "You're not at all what your file suggests, are you, Miller?" "Few of us are," Jack answered, then shifted to the offensive. "The real question is, what exactly is your role here, Agent Reeves? The man in there described you as complicated. Care to explain what that means?" For a brief moment, something unreadable flickered across Reeves's face. "My investigation into Blackwood's organization is official and sanctioned. That's all you need to know." "Not anymore," Jack countered. "The moment they targeted me and Martha, it became something else entirely." Their standoff was interrupted by Sheriff Davis. "Gentlemen, FBI tactical team is securing the prisoners for transport. They're claiming federal jurisdiction." "As expected," Reeves confirmed, still watching Jack. "Sheriff, I'll need a complete incident report. Mr. Miller, you'll be required to provide a formal statement." "Of course," Jack agreed amiably. "After I check on Martha and make sure she's safe." "Mrs. Wilson is here?" Reeves asked, suddenly alert. "Somewhere secure," Jack said vaguely. And that's where she'll stay until I'm confident the threat is neutralized. Reeves stepped closer, lowering his voice again. Don't do anything rash, Miller. You've already complicated an ongoing federal investigation. If you interfere further... Save the threats, Jack interrupted calmly. Your investigation has failed to protect innocent people. Until I see evidence that's changing, I'll do what's necessary. Leaving Reeves seething, Jack made his way downstairs, where FBI agents were processing the scene and preparing the prisoners for transport. He caught Davis's eye and nodded slightly toward the kitchen. The sheriff followed him. I need to check on Martha, then I'll give my statement, Jack told him. But there's something you should know first. I'm listening. Blackwood has someone inside the county assessor's office. Name's Roberts. He's preparing fraudulent paperwork for Martha's property, scheduled to be executed tomorrow morning. Davis cursed under his breath. Roberts should have known. Always too cozy with developers. He paused, studying Jack. You got all this from one of those men? In 5 minutes? I can be persuasive, Jack said simply. So I see. Davis glanced toward the FBI agents. What's their angle in all this? Reeves doesn't strike me as someone who shares information willingly. That's what concerns me, Jack admitted. Something isn't adding up with the FBI's involvement. Davis nodded thoughtfully. What do you need from me? Keep an eye on Reeves and his team. Let me know if anything seems off. Jack checked his watch. And if you could create some administrative delays at the county office tomorrow morning, it would buy us time. I can do that, Davis agreed. But, Jack, I can't keep running interference forever. Whatever you're planning, make it quick. As the house emptied of prisoners and law enforcement began processing the scene, Jack slipped away to the pantry and down to the panic room. Martha looked up from the tablet as he entered, relief washing over her face. Thank heavens you're all right, she said. I watched as much as I could on the security feed. Those men are being taken into custody, Jack assured her, but we're not out of danger yet. The FBI is here, Martha noted. Surely they'll handle things now. Jack sat beside her on the cot. It's complicated, Martha. I don't trust the FBI's approach, and there's still an immediate threat to your property. They're planning to move on it tomorrow morning. Martha's expression hardened with determination. What do we do? For tonight, you stay here, Jack decided. It's the safest place. I need to gather more information and prepare for tomorrow. And then? Jack's expression was grim. Then we stop reacting and start acting. These people have targeted you, me, and other innocent people in this county. It's time they discovered that was a serious mistake. After ensuring Martha was comfortable and had everything she needed, Jack returned upstairs. The FBI and most of the sheriff's deputies had departed, taking the prisoners and evidence with them. Jack found Davis waiting for him in the kitchen. Reeves wanted to wait for your statement, but I convinced him to let you rest and come by the station tomorrow, Davis explained. Told him you were just a shaken-up old farmer who got lucky. I appreciate that, Jack said sincerely. Don't make me regret it, Davis warned. Whatever you're planning, remember I've got a duty to this county. Jack nodded. So do I, in my own way. After Davis left, Jack secured the house and returned to the basement, but not to the panic room. Beyond his regular basement was another concealed space, smaller than the panic room, but equipped differently. This was his operations center, established years ago and maintained with the same discipline that had kept his weapons clean and operational. Inside, he activated a secure computer system and began compiling everything he knew about Blackwood's operation. The lakeside executive retreat would be well defended, but not impenetrable, especially not to someone with Jack's particular skill set. It was time for Kieran Blackwood to learn that he hadn't just triggered the defenses of a retired soldier. He had awakened a ghost that many had feared and few had survived encountering. As midnight gave way to the early hours of morning, Jack's operations center became a hive of focused activity. Using satellite imagery and property records, he mapped the Lakeside Executive Retreat, an exclusive compound nestled against the shores of Lake Millfield, some 15 miles north of his farm. The facility consisted of a main lodge, 6 luxury cabins, and various recreational amenities, all surrounded by dense forest that provided natural privacy and security. On another screen, Jack reviewed what little information he could find on Natalia Voss. Former SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence, now partnered with Blackwood in various investment ventures across Eastern Europe and, more recently, North America. Her presence elevated the stakes considerably. SVR operatives weren't known for half measures. The satellite phone sat on the desk before him, still unused. Making that call would change everything, pulling him back into a world he'd walked away from, with obligations and connections he'd spent 15 years avoiding. Once certain people knew he was active again, they would have expectations, demands. Not yet, Jack decided. He had other resources to tap first. He activated an encrypted messaging system and sent a brief communication to Mike. "Need eyes on Lakeside Executive Retreat. Priority." The response came within minutes. "Satellite redirection in progress. Thermal imaging available in 30. What's happening?" "Escalation," Jack replied simply. Blackwood made his move. While waiting for the satellite data, Jack assembled the equipment he would need. From various hidden compartments throughout the basement, he retrieved items that would appear innocuous to casual observers, but were in fact specialized tools of his former trade. Night vision equipment that exceeded military grade, communications jammers, non-metallic breaching tools, and various other implements designed for covert entry and intelligence gathering. His phone buzzed, Davis calling despite the hour. "Sheriff," Jack answered, continuing his preparations. "We've got problems," Davis said without preamble. "FBI just took over the entire investigation. They're shutting the local authorities out completely. And Reeves. He's not even leading the operation anymore. Some higher-up named Callahan arrived an hour ago." Jack's instincts sharpened. "That's not standard procedure for a home invasion case." "No, it's not," Davis agreed. "And I made some calls about Agent Reeves. Official records show him assigned to the Pittsburgh field office, but when I contacted a buddy there, he'd never heard of him." "Interesting," Jack commented, fitting this new information into the puzzle. "Anything else?" "Yeah. Roberts, our county assessor friend, was found dead in his car about 20 minutes ago. Apparent suicide." "Convenient timing." "My thoughts exactly," Davis confirmed. "Looks like someone's tying up loose ends. Jack, whatever you're planning, you might want to accelerate the timeline." "Already on it," Jack assured him. "Keep your head down, Sheriff. This is going to get worse before it gets better." After ending the call, Jack checked his secure terminal. Mike had delivered satellite thermal imaging of the Lakeside Retreat, now displayed on the screen, showing approximately 12 heat signatures in the main lodge and 2 of the cabins. Based on movement patterns, Jack identified at least 6 security personnel conducting regular patrols, with the remaining signatures likely being Blackwood, Voss, and their inner circle. "Too many for a direct approach," Jack murmured to himself. But direct had never been his style anyway. He studied the layout, identifying vulnerabilities, patrol patterns, potential entry points. The east side of the compound, where the forest grew closest to the main lodge, offered the most promising approach. The regular movement of guards suggested 15-minute rotation intervals, professional but predictable. Jack's messaging system pinged with another update from Mike. Additional intel. Local cell tower near retreat showing unusual activity patterns. Possible communications interception infrastructure. That confirmed another suspicion. Blackwood's operation had signals intelligence capability, likely courtesy of Voss's SVR connections. Standard communications would be compromised. Jack would need to operate under complete emissions control. No phone, no radio, nothing that could be intercepted. By 3 a.m., Jack had formulated his plan. He wouldn't attempt to neutralize Blackwood's entire operation. That would require resources he didn't currently have. Instead, he would focus on intelligence gathering and, if possible, securing evidence that could force legitimate federal intervention. Blackwood's digital security might be robust, but physical documents were likely present in the compound. Finding those would be Jack's primary objective. He returned to the panic room to check on Martha, finding her dozing fitfully on the cot. She awakened at his entrance, immediately alert. "What time is it?" she asked, sitting up. "Just after 3, Jack replied, setting down a fresh thermos of coffee and some food. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I'd have expected, given the circumstances," Martha answered with remarkable composure. "Have you been planning all this time?" Jack nodded. "I'm going to move against them before they can regroup. I need you to stay here until I return or until Sheriff Davis comes for you personally. No one else, Martha. Not FBI, not state police, no one." Martha studied his face. "You don't trust the authorities." "Some I do, some I don't. And right now it's hard to tell which is which." Jack hesitated, then added, "If I'm not back by noon tomorrow, there's a sealed envelope in the desk drawer over there. It contains contact information for people who can help you, along with evidence about what's happening here. Use it if necessary." Martha reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Jack Miller, I don't know who you were before you came to Millfield, but I know who you are now. A good man doing what needs to be done. Thomas always said so, and he was right." Jack felt an unexpected tightness in his throat. Thomas was a good judge of character. "The best," Martha agreed. "Now go do what you need to do. I'll be fine." At 3:45 a.m., Jack emerged from his house dressed in dark tactical clothing that allowed full freedom of movement while breaking up his human silhouette. He wore no body armor. Speed and silence would be his protection tonight. The Sig Sauer was secured in a shoulder holster, while various specialized tools were distributed in pockets and pouches designed for silent access. He took his pickup truck, driving with lights off down the back access road until he reached the conservation land. From there, he proceeded on foot to a predetermined location where he'd hidden a dirt bike years ago, another precaution from a man who always planned for contingencies. The bike, wrapped in protective covering and maintained through regular secret checks, started on the first try. Jack navigated the forest trails with practiced ease, the bike's engine muffled by custom modifications. He deliberately avoided main roads and potential surveillance points, taking a circuitous route that would bring him to the forested area east of the lakeside retreat. By 4:30 a.m., Jack had positioned himself in the woods overlooking the compound. Through his thermal scope, he confirmed the security pattern observed in the satellite imagery: 6 guards maintaining regular patrols, with rotation points creating predictable seams in coverage. The main lodge was a large timber-framed structure with extensive windows facing the lake, a design choice that prioritized views over security. Jack identified Blackwood's probable location, a heat signature on the upper floor that remained stationary while others moved around it, typical of a protected principal. Jack checked his watch. Sunrise would come around 5:45 a.m. He needed to complete his infiltration before then, using the darkest hours of early morning when human alertness was naturally at its lowest. At precisely 4:47 a.m., as the Eastern Patrol completed his sweep and turned back toward the main building, Jack moved. Staying low, using natural cover and shadow, he crossed the open ground between the forest and the compound's outbuildings in under 30 seconds. No alarm sounded, no searchlights activated. The first hurdle was cleared. From the utility shed, Jack observed the patrols for another complete rotation, confirming that their pattern remained unchanged. At 5:03 a.m., he advanced again, this time to the boathouse that sat along the lakeshore, connected to the main lodge by a wooden walkway. The boathouse door featured an electronic keypad lock, standard commercial grade, nothing special. Jack attached a small device to the keypad, and within seconds, the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, he found what he expected: expensive watercraft and equipment, but more importantly, a maintenance hatch that the building plans had shown led to a conduit running to the main lodge's basement. The conduit was tight, barely 20 inches in diameter, but Jack's lean frame allowed him to navigate it with controlled, silent movements. Decades ago, during training, he'd spent 48 hours in spaces far more confining, developing both the physical technique and mental discipline required for such infiltration. At the end of the conduit, Jack found the access panel secured with basic screws. He removed them silently, eased the panel aside, and emerged into the lodge's utility room. Pausing, he listened intently for any indication that his entry had been detected. Hearing nothing but the building's ambient sounds, he proceeded. The basement level contained storage, mechanical systems, and a wine cellar. Jack moved through them like a shadow, his footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. At the stairs leading up to the main level, he paused again, extracting a fiber-optic camera from his gear and threading it underneath the door to survey what lay beyond. The ground floor appeared to have 2 security personnel, one stationed near the main entrance, another patrolling the central area. Both carried sidearms and displayed the alert but relaxed posture of professionals who didn't expect trouble. Jack checked his watch. 5:22 a.m. He had approximately 20 minutes before the changing light would complicate his extraction. Not much time to locate and secure the evidence he needed, but it would have to be enough. Drawing the Sig Sauer, Jack attached the suppressor with practiced efficiency. He didn't want to use it. Lethal force would complicate an already complex situation. But Blackwood's people had already demonstrated their willingness to kill. Jack wouldn't allow misplaced restraint to compromise his mission. With one final deep breath, centering himself in the calm focus that had once made him legendary in certain classified circles, Jack eased open the door and slipped onto the main floor of the Lakeside Executive Retreat. The hunt had begun. The ground floor of the lodge was designed for luxury and comfort. Vaulted ceilings, expensive furnishings, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the lake view. For Jack, it was a tactical nightmare. Too many sight lines, too much open space, too few places to move unseen. He pressed himself against the wall beside the staircase, listening to the rhythm of the patrolling guard's footsteps. 12 steps, pause, turn, 14 steps, pause, turn. After 3 cycles, Jack had the timing mapped precisely in his head. When the guard's back was turned at the furthest point of his patrol, Jack moved, a fluid shadow crossing the peripheral space where the camera's coverage was weakest. He reached an alcove beneath the main staircase just as the guard turned, remaining perfectly still as the man's gaze swept over the area he'd just traversed. The sentry paused, frowning slightly. Jack controlled his breathing, knowing that movement catches the eye faster than stillness. After a moment, the guard resumed his patrol, and Jack continued his advance toward what the building's layout suggested would be the main office. A soft electronic tone from the front entrance briefly froze him in place. The guard stationed there spoke quietly into his radio, then opened the door to admit another security operative returning from an exterior patrol. The momentary distraction was all Jack needed to slip down the hallway, leading to the private areas of the lodge. The door to the main office was secured with another keypad lock, this one more sophisticated than the boathouse entry. Jack extracted a different device from his pocket, one that would have raised serious questions had it been found in a farmer's possession. The NSA-developed prototype wasn't available even to most government agencies, but Jack had connections from his former life that operated outside normal supply chains. The device interfaced with the keypad, cycling through algorithmic combinations at near instantaneous speed. 7 seconds later, the lock disengaged with a barely audible click. Inside, Jack found exactly what he'd expected of a man like Blackwood, opulence masquerading as taste. The office featured exotic hardwoods, leather furnishings, and conspicuous displays of wealth that spoke of someone desperate to project power. More importantly, it contained a large desk with a computer and file cabinets that might hold the evidence Jack sought. Working methodically, Jack accessed the computer first. As expected, it required a password, but the same device that had defeated the door made quick work of this barrier as well. Once inside, Jack inserted a small flash drive that would copy the hard drive's contents while he searched elsewhere. The file cabinets yielded construction plans for Redwood Valley Estates, the development that would eventually sit atop the properties Blackwood was acquiring. Jack photographed these using a specialized camera designed for document reproduction, but the plans themselves weren't incriminating. He needed direct evidence of criminal intent. In the bottom drawer, beneath false invoices and tax documents, Jack found what he was looking for: detailed schematics of the underground cave systems, with annotations indicating storage areas, transit routes, and security checkpoints. More damning were the accompanying logistics documents outlining the movement of product with coded references that any experienced investigator would recognize as scheduling for drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. Jack photographed everything, working with the swift efficiency that had once made him legendary among the shadows. As he finished with the last document, a notification on the computer indicated the drive copying was complete. He removed the flash drive, returning the system to exactly as he'd found it. Just as he was about to exit the office, voices approached from the hallway. Jack quickly moved behind the door, controlling his breathing as it opened. "Still don't understand why we needed to accelerate the Wilson acquisition," a male voice was saying. "Blackwood," Jack recognized from the motel meeting. "Because your people failed to eliminate Miller," came a female response with a subtle Slavic accent, Natalia Voss. "He's not what he appears to be." "A retired soldier? My team should have been more than capable." "Not just a soldier," Voss interrupted sharply. "I've been reviewing what we know. The gaps in his service record, the pattern of deployments, the complete disappearance from all systems after retirement. Jack Miller was Ghost Program." Jack felt his blood cool at the words. The Ghost Program was something few knew existed, a black operations initiative so deeply classified that most intelligence agencies denied its existence. "You're certain?" Blackwood sounded skeptical. "I recognize the signatures," Voss replied. "In my former position, we lost several high-value targets to American operators who didn't officially exist. Operatives with certain patterns. Miller fits them precisely." They moved further into the office, forcing Jack to slide silently along the wall, remaining behind the door as it closed. He was now trapped in the room with them. "If you're right," Blackwood mused, "that explains how he neutralized an entire tactical team." "It does," Voss agreed. "But it creates a new problem. Ghost operators never truly retire. They maintain connections, protocols, fail-safes." "Meaning?" "Meaning if Miller has activated those old networks, we're dealing with something far beyond local law enforcement or even standard FBI." Jack watched through the crack between the hinges as Blackwood moved to the desk, his expression troubled. "The FBI presence is already concerning. This Agent Reeves is not our primary concern," Voss cut in. "Reeves is ambitious, but contained. His superiors have their own interests in this region, interests that temporarily align with ours. And Miller? Miller is different," Voss said, her tone hardening. "He's a direct threat, not just to our operation, but to everything we've built. The normal rules don't apply to ghost operators. They function outside the system, beyond accountability." A bitter irony, Jack thought, coming from a former SVR operative. "Then we eliminate him," Blackwood stated flatly. "Increase the team size, change the approach." Voss laughed softly. "You already tried that. No, we need to change strategies entirely. Apply pressure where he's vulnerable." "The Wilson woman?" "Eventually. But first, we use what's coming into play this morning. Blackwood looked confused. The county paperwork? Roberts is dead? Not the paperwork, Voss said impatiently. The federal operation, Callahan's team. I don't understand. You don't need to, Voss replied dismissively. Just be ready to move on the Wilson property at exactly 10 a.m., regardless of what else is happening. I've made certain arrangements that will ensure no interference. Jack's mind raced. Callahan, the FBI supervisor Davis had mentioned, and some kind of federal operation planned for this morning. The pieces were starting to align, but the picture they formed was darker than he'd anticipated. What about our shipment tonight? Blackwood asked. Should we postpone? Absolutely not, Voss responded firmly. The buyers have already paid. $50 million doesn't sit in offshore accounts without attention. The weapons move tonight as planned. Weapons, $50 million. The stakes were even higher than Jack had suspected. Now, Voss continued, gathering papers from the desk. We need to prepare for the morning briefing. The security team needs updated protocols in case Miller makes another appearance. As they moved toward the door, Jack prepared for the inevitable confrontation. In the confined space with 2 targets, his options were limited, but he had faced worse odds. Then, unexpectedly, Blackwood's phone rang. Yes, he answered, listening for a moment. I see. We'll be right there. He turned to Voss. Security detected an anomaly at the perimeter. Possible intrusion on the east side. Jack remained perfectly still as they exited, Blackwood pulling the door firmly shut behind them. The diversion he'd arranged, a simple timer attached to a small device that would trigger the perimeter sensors, had worked perfectly. Once certain they were gone, Jack moved swiftly. He had the evidence he needed, proof of Blackwood's operation, their intentions for the cave systems, and now knowledge of a major weapons shipment scheduled for tonight. More concerning was the revelation about federal involvement and whatever was planned for 10 a.m. Jack exited the office, retracing his steps with increased urgency. The security team's focus on the eastern perimeter would thin coverage elsewhere, but time was now his enemy. The growing light of dawn would soon eliminate the natural cover of darkness. He encountered a lone guard at the basement access door. The man's attention divided between his post and the radio chatter about the perimeter alarm. Jack closed the distance silently, then struck. A precise blow to the vagus nerve that rendered the guard unconscious without sound or permanent damage. Dragging the unconscious man into a storage closet, Jack secured him with zip ties and continued to the basement. The extraction route remained clear, and within minutes he was retracing his path through the utility conduit back to the boathouse. Outside, the sky was lightening to a pale gray as dawn approached. Jack moved through the shadows along the lakeshore, using the trees for cover until he reached the forest line. The perimeter alarm had drawn most of the security detail to the opposite side of the compound, allowing him to slip away undetected. By the time he reached his hidden dirt bike, Jack's mind was already calculating his next moves. The evidence was secure, but the revelations about this morning's operation left him with precious little time. Whatever Voss had planned involving Callahan's FBI team would happen soon, and Martha remained vulnerable. As he navigated the forest trails back toward the conservation land, Jack made his decision. The situation had escalated beyond what he could handle alone. It was time to make the call he'd been avoiding, to reach back into the shadows he'd left behind and activate resources that came with both tremendous power and significant costs. By 6:15 a.m., Jack had returned to his truck. The eastern horizon was now painted in shades of gold and pink, the new day arriving with deceptive beauty. Jack checked his watch, calculating. 3 hours until whatever was planned for 10 a.m. 3 hours to prepare for a confrontation that was rapidly expanding beyond a local criminal enterprise into something with disturbing national security implications. As he drove back toward his farm, Jack's expression hardened with resolve. 15 years ago, he had walked away from the shadows to find peace. Now those shadows had found him, threatening not just his life, but Martha's and potentially many others. There would be no more reactive defense, no more half measures. It was time for the ghost to fully reawaken. Jack arrived back at his farm as the morning sun cleared the eastern hills, casting long shadows across the dew-soaked fields. No unfamiliar vehicles were visible, but that meant little. After last night's confrontation, any further approach would be more subtle, more dangerous. He conducted a quick perimeter check, verifying that his defensive measures remained intact before entering the house through the back door. Inside, he moved directly to the panic room to check on Martha. She was awake, sitting on the edge of the cot with a cup of coffee in her hands. Her face brightened when she saw him. "Thank goodness, I was getting worried." "Sorry for the wait," Jack said, setting down his equipment. "Things are more complicated than I anticipated." "Did you find what you needed?" Jack nodded. "And then some. Blackwood's operation is bigger than local real estate fraud. They're using the cave systems beneath our properties for weapons trafficking, major international shipments." Martha's eyes widened. "Good heavens." "There's more," Jack continued, checking his watch. "They have something planned for 10 a.m. today, something involving your property and federal law enforcement. We have less than 3 hours to prepare." "Federal law enforcement? Isn't that good news?" "It should be," Jack acknowledged. "But something doesn't add up. The FBI agent Reeves has been sidelined by a superior named Callahan, and from what I overheard, Blackwood's people seem to think some federal elements have interests that align with theirs." Martha set down her coffee cup, her expression hardening with the practical resolve of a woman who had weathered many storms in her long life. "Corrupt FBI agents? Is that what you're suggesting?" "Not necessarily corruption in the traditional sense," Jack clarified. "Intelligence agencies sometimes make strategic compromises for what they consider higher priorities. It's possible Blackwood's operation intersects with something they're tracking, something they consider more important than local criminal activity. So, where does that leave us?" Jack's expression was grim. "In a precarious position. Blackwood still wants your property, and they've accelerated their timeline. Whatever they have planned for 10 a.m., I don't intend to wait and find out." He moved to the small desk in the corner of the panic room and withdrew the satellite phone he'd brought down earlier. "I need to make a call. Someone who can help us navigate this situation." "One of your old colleagues?" Martha asked perceptively. Jack nodded. "From another life." He dialed a number from memory, one he'd never forgotten despite 15 years of disuse. It rang 3 times before a woman answered, her voice neutral, guarded. "Identification," she demanded without preamble. "Sierra Echo 947, Jack replied, using a code that should have been deactivated long ago. "Requesting Protocol Lazarus." A momentary silence, then, "Voice confirmation accepted. Hold for verification." Jack waited, knowing that somewhere sophisticated systems were confirming his identity through voice pattern analysis and other markers known only to a select few. "Jack Miller," the woman finally said, her tone shifting slightly. "You've been quiet a long time." "Not by choice today," Jack replied. "I need assistance. Priority level Alpha." Another pause. "Understood. Parameters?" Jack outlined the situation concisely: Blackwood's operation, the weapons shipment, the apparent federal complication, and the immediate threat to Martha's property. "Location confirmed. Assets in your region are limited," the woman responded. "Nearest qualified response team is approximately 90 minutes out. Satellite support can be redirected immediately. Full authorization package requires director approval." "We don't have time for bureaucracy," Jack pressed. "I've confirmed international weapons trafficking with SVR connections. That alone justifies immediate action." "SVR involvement changes the equation," the woman acknowledged. "I'm escalating your request. Stand by for callback within 15 minutes. The call ended, leaving Jack to face Martha's questioning gaze. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we prepare as if help isn't coming," Jack answered pragmatically. "If it arrives, we'll adjust accordingly." He spent the next 10 minutes showing Martha how to access the escape tunnel, ensuring she understood exactly where it led and what to do once she reached the exit point. Then he checked and rechecked his weapons and equipment, preparing for whatever might come at 10 a.m. The satellite phone rang precisely 12 minutes after the initial call. "Authorization granted," the woman informed him without introduction. "Tactical Team ETA 82 minutes. Satellite surveillance online now. Drone support in 30. Key intelligence follows." She proceeded to brief Jack on details that confirmed his worst suspicions. Agent Reeves was indeed FBI, but attached to a specialized counterintelligence unit. Callahan, however, was not who he claimed to be. While using legitimate FBI credentials, he was actually operating under the direction of a covert DIA task force investigating potential compromise of weapon systems with suspected Russian involvement. "They believe Blackwood's shipment tonight contains classified weapons technology?" Jack asked, pieces falling into place. "Correct. Their operation was designed to allow the transaction to proceed under surveillance, identifying all involved parties before intervention. At the expense of local civilians," Jack noted, his voice hardening. "Standard protocol for prioritized counterintelligence," the woman replied, neither defending nor condemning the approach. "However, your involvement has changed the calculation. Director Morris specifically authorized full-spectrum support." Jack felt a jolt of recognition at the name. James Morris had been a senior field operative during Jack's active years, a principled man who understood the human costs of strategic decisions. "Understood. What about 10 a.m.? Intercepts indicate a coordinated operation to secure the Wilson property through seemingly legitimate channels. County officials, accompanied by DIA personnel posing as FBI, will serve eviction papers based on fraudulent tax liens created by the deceased assessor. They're using actual federal agents as unknowing cover for a criminal land grab," Jack concluded, disgusted by the elegance of the scheme. "Precisely. Once ownership transfer is initiated through official channels, reversing it becomes exponentially more difficult, even with evidence of criminal conspiracy." Jack checked his watch. 7:43 a.m. Just over 2 hours until Blackwood's people would arrive, with legitimate federal agents unwittingly providing cover for their criminal activities. "Transmitting operational support package now," the woman continued. "Authorization level Omega, full discretion authorized." The implications were significant. Level Omega meant Jack had complete operational freedom, legally, tactically, and strategically. It was the highest authorization possible, one that carried enormous responsibility and potential consequences. "Confirmed," Jack acknowledged. "And Martha Wilson?" "Protective custody authorized. Extraction team included in tactical support. Safe house already being prepared." As the call concluded, Jack felt the familiar weight of operational command settling on his shoulders, a weight he'd carried many times before in distant conflicts and shadowy confrontations that would never be recorded in any official history. Martha had remained silent throughout the conversation, but her sharp eyes had missed nothing. "They're coming to take my home, aren't they? Using fake government papers?" "Yes," Jack confirmed, "but they won't succeed." "How can you be so sure?" Jack allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Because they made a critical mistake in their planning." "What's that?" "They assumed I was alone." Jack showed her the tablet, displaying satellite imagery, now focused on Millfield County. "Help is coming, Martha. Professional help." For the next hour, Jack methodically prepared his defensive strategy. Using the satellite data, he identified 3 likely approach routes to Martha's property and established countermeasures for each. The drone support, when it arrived, provided real-time surveillance of Blackwood's compound, where increased activity suggested preparation for the morning's operation. At 9:15 a.m., Jack's perimeter sensors alerted him to an approaching vehicle. The camera feed showed Sheriff Davis's cruiser coming up the driveway. Jack met him at the door, weapon concealed, but ready. "Morning, Jack," Davis greeted him, his expression grave. "Got some news you need to hear." "Inside," Jack directed, checking for surveillance before closing the door. In the kitchen, Davis declined the offered coffee, too agitated to sit. "FBI's taken control of the county assessor's office. This Agent Callahan is pushing through emergency proceedings on Martha's property, claiming significant tax delinquency. They're serving papers at 10 a.m. with a team that includes state troopers." "Not just FBI and state troopers," Jack corrected. "DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, operating under FBI cover." Davis stared at him. "How the hell would you know that?" "I have my resources," Jack replied simply. "The question is, are you here as Sheriff Davis, carrying out official duties, or as someone concerned about justice in Millfield County?" Davis didn't hesitate. "I took an oath to protect the people of this county, not help rob them through fraudulent paperwork. I don't care what federal badges they're flashing." Jack nodded, recognizing the integrity of the man before him. "Then there's something you should see." He led Davis to the operations room, showing him the evidence gathered from Blackwood's compound and the real-time surveillance now tracking multiple vehicles preparing to move from the lakeside retreat toward Martha's property. The sheriff whistled low. "This is beyond anything I expected." He looked at Jack with new understanding. "Who are you really, Miller?" "Right now," Jack answered, checking the time. 9:27 a.m. "I'm just someone trying to make sure justice is done. And for that, I could use the help of a good sheriff." Davis straightened. Decision made. "What do you need me to do?" As Jack outlined the sheriff's role in the rapidly developing operation, he monitored the surveillance feeds showing vehicles now in motion. Blackwood's team from the lakeside retreat, the federal contingent from the county offices, and in the distance, approaching rapidly from the southeast, the unmarked helicopter carrying the tactical team that represented Jack's past life, returning, full circle, to the present crisis. The confrontation was now inevitable. The only questions remaining were who would emerge victorious, and at what cost. At 9:55 a.m., Jack positioned himself in the tree line overlooking Martha's farmhouse. Sheriff Davis had taken up his assigned position at the front of the property, his cruiser parked prominently in the driveway, a visible reminder of local authority. Martha remained secured in Jack's panic room, connected via encrypted communications to both Jack and the approaching tactical team. Through high-powered binoculars, Jack observed two black SUVs approaching from the north, Blackwood's people right on schedule. From the east came three official vehicles, one FBI sedan and two state police cruisers. The pieces were moving exactly as anticipated. Jack's earpiece crackled with a secure transmission. "Talon actual to Ghost. We are 5 minutes out, maintaining communications blackout. 8 operators ready for insertion on your mark." "Acknowledged, Talon," Jack responded quietly. "Hold at checkpoint Bravo until my signal." The two groups, Blackwood's team and the federal contingent, arrived at Martha's property within 30 seconds of each other, creating the precise scenario Voss had engineered, official-looking federal agents providing unintentional cover for Blackwood's criminal operation. From his concealed position, Jack watched as a man in an impeccable suit, presumably the false Agent Callahan, approached Sheriff Davis, who had positioned himself between the arrivals and Martha's front door. "Sheriff Davis," Callahan greeted with bureaucratic authority. "I'm Supervisory Special Agent Callahan, FBI. We have a federal warrant to seize this property for delinquent taxes and suspected criminal activity." Davis stood his ground, badge prominently displayed. "I'll need to see that warrant, Agent Callahan, and I'll remind you that this is my jurisdiction." The FBI credentials Callahan displayed appeared authentic, because they were, Jack knew. The man was indeed federal law enforcement, just not FBI as claimed. The deception was multi-layered, with even the state troopers unaware of Callahan's true affiliation. From the Blackwood SUVs emerged 4 men in business attire, led by a smooth-looking individual Jack recognized from his surveillance photos as Robert's replacement, another county official in Blackwood's pocket. "Sheriff," the man called out, approaching with practiced confidence. "I'm Lawrence Jenkins from the county assessor's office. We're here to process the property transfer following federal seizure." As the two groups converged on the porch, Jack activated his comms. "Talon Actual, execute Phase 1. Within seconds, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors became audible. All heads turned as a matte black helicopter appeared over the tree line, hovering momentarily before settling in the open field adjacent to Martha's property. "What the hell is this?" Callahan demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his concealed weapon. "That," Jack announced, emerging from the tree line with his official credentials displayed, credentials that had been digitally updated and transmitted to him just hours before, would be federal intervention. The real kind. The confusion on the faces of both Blackwood's people and Callahan's team was evident as 8 operators in tactical gear deployed from the helicopter, creating a secure perimeter with practiced efficiency. "Jack Miller," Callahan stated, recognition and alarm mixing in his expression. "You're interfering with a federal operation." "No, Agent Callahan," Jack corrected, approaching steadily. "Or should I say, Major Callahan of DIA Special Activities Division. You're interfering with mine." The revelation sent a ripple of confusion through the assembled state troopers, who exchanged uncertain glances. Jack turned to Sheriff Davis. "Sheriff, would you please explain to the state officers what's actually happening here?" Davis stepped forward, projecting the natural authority that had made him effective in local law enforcement for decades. "Officers, we have evidence that these proceedings are fraudulent, part of a criminal conspiracy involving international weapons trafficking. I'm requesting your assistance in securing these suspects while we sort this out." One of Blackwood's men made a move toward his jacket, but froze as tactical operators smoothly trained weapons in his direction. "I wouldn't," Jack advised quietly. Before Callahan could respond, a secure tablet was handed to him by one of the tactical team members. On it was a live video conference with Director Morris himself, a man whose authority superseded even Callahan's classified operation. The DIA agent's face paled as he listened to his superior through an earpiece, occasionally glancing at Jack with newfound respect and wariness. "Stand down," Callahan finally ordered his team. "Operational parameters have changed." With Callahan's team neutralized, Jack turned his attention to Blackwood's people, who now found themselves isolated and exposed. "The county assessor Roberts is dead. Apparent suicide, though we both know better. The paperwork you're carrying is fraudulent, created to steal property for Kieran Blackwood's smuggling operation." "These are serious allegations," Jenkins blustered, maintaining his cover. "We're here on legitimate county business." "Save it," Jack cut him off. "We have surveillance recordings of your meeting with Blackwood last night, detailed files on the entire operation, and testimony from one of the attack team members sent to kill me yesterday. It's over." As if to punctuate his statement, another helicopter appeared on the horizon, this one bearing FBI markings. Agent Reeves had finally been looped into the full operation, his counterintelligence team authorized to take custody of the prisoners and evidence. By 10:30 a.m., Martha's property was the center of a full federal operation. Blackwood's people were in custody, the fraudulent paperwork had been secured as evidence, and the tactical team had established a defensive perimeter around both Martha's farm and Jack's property. "You've caused quite a shakeup," Reeves commented as he joined Jack near the perimeter. "Callahan's operation had high-level authorization." "So did mine," Jack replied simply. Reeves studied him with new understanding. "You're not just ex-military, are you, Miller?" "Today, I'm just a farmer protecting his neighbor," Jack answered, deliberately avoiding the question. "Tomorrow depends on how this plays out." Sheriff Davis approached, having concluded his briefing of the state officers. "Jack, thought you'd want to know. We just got word that federal teams are moving on the lakeside retreat. Blackwood and Voss were still there, apparently unaware that their operation had been compromised." "They won't go quietly," Jack predicted. As if confirming his assessment, their comms crackled with an urgent update. "Firebird to all units. Be advised, we have an active situation at the lakeside retreat. Suspects are armed and resistive. Blackwood is in custody, but Voss is barricaded with hostages." Jack exchanged a quick look with the tactical team leader, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Some situations required specific expertise. "I'm going," Jack informed Reeves. "This is my operation." "You're a civilian now, Miller," Reeves objected. "Whatever you once were." "Check your updated briefing," Jack countered, already moving toward the helicopter. "My authorization is still active." 30 minutes later, Jack was inserting with the tactical team at the lakeside retreat, where Voss had barricaded herself in the main lodge with 3 hostages. Lodge staff caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Outside, federal agents maintained a perimeter while negotiators attempted to establish communication. "She won't negotiate," Jack told the tactical commander as they reviewed the building schematics. "SVR training emphasizes resistance to the end." "Your call, Ghost," the commander deferred, recognizing Jack's expertise. "How do you want to play it?" Jack considered the situation with the cold calculation that had once been his professional hallmark. "The utility conduit I used last night. It's still our best entry point. I'll go in alone. She's expecting a team, not an individual." The operation that followed unfolded with the precision of longtime professionals. While federal negotiators maintained the illusion of dialogue at the front of the building, Jack slipped back into the same access tunnel he'd navigated hours earlier. Inside, he located Voss and the hostages in the main lodge's central room through thermal imaging. Her attention was focused forward, toward the federal negotiator's position, leaving her rear security minimal. When Jack made his move, it was with the swift efficiency that had once earned him his ghostly reputation. 2 precision stun grenades disoriented Voss long enough for Jack to close the distance. The hand-to-hand confrontation that followed was brief but intense. Voss was exceptionally trained, but Jack had faced better. Within moments, she was subdued, the hostages secured. As federal agents flooded in to take control, Voss glared at Jack with a mixture of hatred and professional recognition. "I knew what you were," she spat, blood trickling from her split lip. "Ghost operator." "Former," Jack corrected quietly, "until you targeted my neighbor." By late afternoon, Jack returned to his farm to find Martha sitting comfortably on his porch, sharing tea with Director Morris himself. "Jack," Morris greeted him, rising with the same military bearing Jack remembered. "Your friend has been telling me about your farming techniques. Quite the change from your previous occupation." "It was," Jack acknowledged, emphasizing the past tense. Martha patted the chair beside her. "These nice federal people tell me my property is safe, that all this business with false papers has been cleared up." "It has," Morris confirmed. "In fact, all the properties Blackwood's organization acquired through fraudulent means are being returned to their rightful owners or their families. The evidence you secured was conclusive." As evening approached, the federal presence began to withdraw. The weapons shipment had been intercepted, Blackwood and Voss were in custody, and the broader conspiracy was being unraveled through international cooperation. "What happens now, Jack?" Martha asked as they watched the final helicopter depart. "Do you go back to being just a farmer?" Jack gazed out over the rolling fields that had been his sanctuary for 15 years. "I'm not sure that's possible anymore." "Because they found you? The people from your past?" "Because I remembered something important," Jack replied. "Sometimes protecting what matters means more than personal peace." Martha nodded with understanding, born of her own long life. Thomas would say, "You found your purpose again." As the sun set over Millfield County, Jack Miller stood at the boundary between his property and Martha's, between his past and his future. The quiet farmer remained, but the ghost had reawakened, and in that awakening perhaps found a new kind of peace. The kind that comes not from running from who you are, but from embracing it fully, with all its complexities and contradictions. The kind that understands that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are those who appear to all the world as nothing more than humble farmers tending their fields under the vast, indifferent sky.